City, the Attitude Awards were in town, celebrating loud outfits and the LGBTQ plus community. But what man had to work harder than most to have a good time was actor, comedian, and haircuts Milan Rizwan, who's been labouring over series 2 of Juice.
You don't have more fun. I'm actually currently not having more fun because I'm doing really long days and I have a lot of debt. I'm giving the illusion of someone who has a hedonistic fun life. That's all that happens. I'm having more fun.
Aí, ọjọ́ kì í máa lólóhùn.
Hello. Okay, we're going to start. I'm just going to put the Zoom on record. Okay, thank you so much. So, warmest welcome to Professor Lumumba. We are extremely appreciating your time this morning to spend time with all the members of Global Peace Let Talk. My apologies, there's a bit of a hiccup with the Zoom link, but we're also recording it on YouTube. So people are now starting to join. So to everybody here, thank you so much for joining. I think what I've seen is that it's every single person that we invited knows Professor. Professor has leaving a mark across the world and across Africa for his dedication to making Africa economically prosperous. I have extreme respect for Professor for what he is doing. I find him to be like an eagle. He's just so brave. And he soars across the skies and he sees where there are things that aren't right. And Professor had this incredible way of sharing to Africa that they need to rise up and not stand back, because Africa should be the leader across the world. I really believe that. Um, I don't think I don't believe that Africa is a third world country, and I know that Professor wants Africa to be the first world country, to be prosperous and expand and grow, and not for everybody to leave Africa and go to different countries, but to stay in Africa and make it work. So, with the greatest respect, Professor, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome, and the floor is now yours. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Doctor, for organizing this virtual meeting. It is attending this inaugural meeting, and I believe that it affords us an opportunity to discuss or to put on the table a number of things. We all, of course, do appreciate that we are talking about the continent of Africa, and it is always good to remind ourselves that this is the mother continent, to remind ourselves that over the years, the continent has suffered in many ways. Sometimes when you raise those historical issues, there are those who say, we know that. But the reason why we remind them is, as the great Nigerian Chinua Achebe said, that if you do not know when the rain started beating you, you cannot recognize when you start drying. And that is why we keep on reminding the world that Africa still continues to suffer because of modern day slavery, for example. Many of us will know that as I speak now, and those of you who are from Nigeria know what is now called Japa, where young men and women are braving and dying in the Mediterranean Sea and in the Atlantic in their quest of what they consider to be greener pasture on the other side. Many of you will know that we have modern day slavery in Libya and in some parts of the Arab world, and we remind ourselves of that. We also know that the impact of colonization is still with us in the continent of Africa. And you know that that impact is what indeed continues to arrest Africa's development. We are familiar, those of you who are from the Sahel, the ongoing insurgencies in Guinea, in Chad, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, the very active war that is going on in Sudan, the conflict that is going on in Ethiopia, the unrest that continues to bedevil Somalia, the unrest that continues to bedevil southern Cameroon, sometimes known as Ambazonia, the conflict that is going on in eastern Congo. All these things put together continue to delay and sometimes to defeat Africa's development in many ways. And I'm aware that this is a conference that brings together men and women who believe in peace as one of the critical ingredients in ensuring development. But it's important to warn ourselves, when we talk about peace, what do we really mean? Is it the absence of war in the classical definition of peace, that if there is no armed conflict, then we say we are peaceful? And if that is our understanding of what peace is, what will you tell the fisher people who are fishing around Lake Chad, and the lake has shrunk by more than 70% so that in their peaceful environment, they cannot feed themselves? What can you tell the farmers in different parts of Nigeria who cannot attend to their farmland because of Boko Haram? What can you tell the people in the Amhara region of Ethiopia who, as we speak now, cannot go to their farms, or those in Tigray? These are things that call into question the definition of peace. Can we talk about peace when young men and women cannot find opportunities, whether they are in Ghana or in the Gambia or in Sierra Leone or in Nigeria, and they are prepared to risk their lives to cross the Sahara Desert and to be humiliated in Tunisia and Morocco and in Western Europe as they seek peace of a different kind? These, in my view, are the issues that we must wrap our minds around. And there is something that we must also recognize, and recognize it very seriously, that while we are quick to remind ourselves that Africa is one whole continent, we must always remember that the Africa that we talk about today is a product of active subdivision of Africa into spheres of influence. When the European powers met in Berlin in 1884 and 1885 at the behest of King Leopold of the Belgians, and we never remind ourselves that King Leopold of the Belgians was responsible for the death of 15 million people in what is today the Democratic Republic of Congo. And when they sat in Berlin, they divided the countries, the 54 or 55 of them that we still have. Those of you who are from Nigeria, you can see my good friend Obichukwu Okafor, who is from Nigeria. You will know how Nigeria came into being. Nigeria was administered, the northern part separately, the southern part separately, then suddenly they were put together. And the impact of that creation of Nigeria is still something that threatens peace in Nigeria. You only have to read Chinua Achebe's The Trouble with Nigeria to appreciate that. So today, without going too deep into history, I'm taking this opportunity to remind us that peace is critical for development. And peace must be peace that is represented by the language that we use, by the manner in which we conduct ourselves, and what we do in order to guarantee our well-being economically, spiritually, and politically. And it is in that context, therefore, that I make these introductory words in order to invite all of us who are present here that we, as warriors of peace, and it is not peace for its own sake, it is peace that we may improve the quality of our lives. We have a duty to spread this gospel and to spread it and to practice it and to ensure that we change human hearts and human behavior by extension. I believe those very brief introductory remarks sets the agenda to allow for a conversation rather than a monologue. In my view, dialogue is better than monologue. Thank you very much, and let us have a good dialogue.
Thank you so much, Professor. Dr. Vedabas, can you hear me? Dr. Vedabas?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. There is a problem with the network, so you can't see me. So
Okay.
the video is not working somehow. However, and thanks to Professor for his very, very good, poignant speech. And I think we all need to, revisit some important points that he flagged off. and in the context of not only peace in our own surroundings, but also peace in the world. And so his points are something we really need to look at it. What we could do is, if someone could transcribe, ma'am, his points and summarize it, then it becomes very useful for many of us, if that is possible. Or if Professor himself could, very short, point-wise, could share some of the points that he shared, so that we keep them with us. That's my request.
Yes. So, Doctor, just if you permit me for 1 minute, it is also important that when we talk about peace, it cannot be circumscribed to Africa. We know there are ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and Russia and in the Gaza, and all these conflicts have an implication. And as Martin Luther King Jr. used to say, what is happening in your neighbor's backyard must concern you, because the world is but a global village, and this peace that surpasses all understanding must be peace that is known by all humanity. And I want to conclude by reminding us, a great South African freedom fighter, Robert Sobukwe, said in 1960, there is only one race, the human race.
That's a very powerful statement, Professor Lumumba. I just want to share again our sincere appreciation for your time. We really know how busy you are. So thank you very much. I just want to ask if anybody else would like to add anything before Professor leaves.
Yeah, my humble regards to everyone. I only want to comprehend what Professor Lumumba has just said, because at times most people doesn't even know the actual meaning of peace. Many people believe that it is only why there is conflict or why there is no unity among people is the only thing. No, we need to understand that peace is when people are able to resolve their conflicts and can come together to improve the quality of their lives. Because if we say there is peace here, there is peace there, and at the end of the day, there is no improvement of the lives of the people in the given society, that means the peace is still missing in that regard. And finally, I want to cite an example of what we just did yesterday. Like it would be a kind of kudos to the Global Peace Let's Talk if this program can, if this organization can also have a segment whereby we can be bringing up the young children. Like yesterday, we visited a school here in Nigeria, in Osogbo, Osun State, in the southwestern part of Nigeria, St. Charles Grammar School. It is only boys school. I want to tell you, after when we concluded the meeting with the children, about 10 children came to meet me and talk to me of different issues they are passing through at home. I mean, the conflict between the father and the mother. So it will also be a kind of kudos to the organization if we can have a segment whereby children can be bringing to board and discuss.
Thank you,
because they also.
Okay, thank
yes.
you,
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, so it will be good enough for the Global Peace Network to also have a segment whereby we can be bringing up children from different countries to us, because the children also have roles to play in peace building. Children, they have role to play in peace building. Like in 2019, we were in Ondo State in Nigeria, and we visited a school, St. Michael Primary School. When we got to this school, after when we have discussed with these children, a young child of 8-year-old.
Lamina, round off because of the time limit. Round off.
Okay. So let me just make it short. I want to advise the Global Peace Network to have a segment whereby young children can be bringing on board to discuss with them, to also let them know that they have roles to play, and we need to assign rules to them in their various countries. Thank you so much.
Okay, just to queue up to what Amina said, it's a pleasure, Professor Lumumba. I'm so thankful for your words of wisdom. Each time I listen to you or I read from you, I actually increase in terms of what I do in my peace building work. What I just have to share, especially as I'm coming from the Cameroonian setup, where we have an ongoing crisis for the past 8 years, what I would say is that I appreciate your ideal or your ideals about the dialogue about justice, because I believe that sustainable peace can never come without these two, especially when we're talking about peace that goes with inclusion. Because if you have warring parties fighting and the common man is suffering, we definitely need to, at that dialogue table, have every actor on that table to talk out their differences and also contribute towards the solution. And one thing I would say is if Cameroon is going on with ongoing violence, a total full blown war, it is because each time a national dialogue is actually convened, you have parties in conflict. A is having a conflict with B, and when it is time for dialogue, A is calling for that dialogue table for C to discuss with A. Where is B? So if we have all the parties in conflict dictate the terms, definitely they will also contribute to the solution. So this is why in our African setups, it's so difficult to arrive at sustainable peace, because there is somebody who thinks that he is high up there and needs to dictate the terms for dialogue to take place. So I'm really appreciative of the fact that yes, we need to dialogue, but definitely we need to be inclusive. We need to make sure that we get a level playground for all of us to be able to talk out our grievances and equally contribute towards the solution to whatever has been aching us right in our marrow, other than leaving people quarreling, and the crisis is degenerating into violence, and many people are killed, burned to ashes. This is the case of Cameroon. Women, children are burned to ashes in their homes, schools, hospitals razed to ashes, just because this party doesn't want to listen to the other. And the second thing is, when two parties are fighting, they definitely um, cause this violence to degenerate because they stay on fixed positions. And when you have fixed positions, that violence can never, or that crisis can never be resolved. So I come in here to add this aspect of making parties to shift from their fixed positions to a flexible a position that can be able to offer them an open-minded nature for them to discuss as one man, consider the consequences of their actions on the common person, so that sustainable peace can actually be achieved. Thank you, Professor. That is my submission. I think we have the hand of Professor Ambassador Shanu. Please, if you can unmute your microphone and speak, that would be fine.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate that you have organized this wonderful program. It's my humble request to Professor Lumumba that Gaza and Sudan, which are Muslim countries, they are not in a good position to understand that they are how much injury they are causing to future generations. And I will appreciate if you just put some recorded on YouTube or anything, particularly addressed to the Sudanese and to the Gaza people, that they are harming the future generations. They are not aware of what they are doing. And it's such a pity that even we sitting outside these areas, we are feeling the pain and the trouble that they are causing to each other. It's my humble request, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is very well noted. And I think we have spoken about this, and particularly in the recent past, Gaza and of course Sudan, which I call the forgotten war. I remind the people that Chad is now the home of over 1.4 million refugees. And Egypt is also bearing the brunt, as is Ethiopia, as is Southern Sudan. And of course, you know what is happening with the shipping line, with the activities in Gaza and then Yemen. And it is a painful thing, and the voices must not remain silent. Dr. Pina, one of the things that we must remember, sometimes we feel so helpless. We think that our voices is like trying to water a desert with a teaspoon, but let us really just do something. I always remember Ali Mazrui used to say during apartheid that the only thing I do in my fight against apartheid is not to buy goods from apartheid South Africa. I do not believe that it will topple it down, but if we combine all our efforts, the message will be sent clearly and eloquently, and in the fullness of time, people's hearts will melt away if our message is one of courage and compassion.
Thank you. Well noted, sir. Thanks a lot.
How many months are you doing work with Ghana?
A year.
Are there any other comment?
We have some comments in the chat room, Dr. Nikki. If you don't mind me reading them, we have a comment from Devin who says the impact of colonialism is really still felt today in Africa, especially in my country, DR Congo, whereby millions of people have already died and thousands more still dying every day due to modern day slavery, which is still ongoing, with our natural resources being plundered by the colonialists and their counterparts till now. It is so sad when our politicians keep going to look for solutions, our problems, to the same people who bring us those problems. Very pathetic. And then Dr. Mogisho says children must be involved in peace-seeking process, because if they are trained about peace, they can grow knowing that peace is a way of life. In the DRC, my home country, for instance, children are forcibly enrolled in militia because they do not understand what peace is. They think that what life is. So I don't know if Professor Lumumba can respond to these comments.
You know, one of the things that I know is that there are quite a number of voices that are out there, and our weakness lies in our lack of coordination. We are all doing things in silos. And one of the things that I've promised myself in the coming year is to try and persuade men and women of goodwill across the world that we can run our own little outfits, but let us have a synergy. Because when there is that synergy, then we will be stronger, more powerful, and our voices will be heard. And I hear you. If you look at the behavior of many of our politicians, you look at, for example, the conflict in Southern Cameroon, which I keep on talking about almost every other week. The reason why nothing happens is because we are not coordinating our activities. And going forward, I believe in a forum such as this, we can coordinate, and whichever other forums we belong to, let us make the year 2025 a year of coordination and synergization for purposes of sending a strong, sustained, and sustainable message, coupled with the dramatizing our dissatisfaction. I always learned great lessons from two events. One of them is the manner in which Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi dramatized the Indians' anger toward the British. And the second one, of course, is the manner in which Martin Luther King Jr. dramatized the anger of African Americans toward discrimination. And of course, the third one, the anger with which we dramatize our hatred toward the apartheid regime. So in short, sharp answer to your question, let us synergize. Let not our interventions be episodic. They must be sustained. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Lumumba. That is actually an adequate and a soothing response there. We have the hand of Israel. Please, can you unmute your microphone and chip in your contribution? Thank you.
All right, thank you. It's a great privilege to speak and also to learn from the wealth of knowledge of Prof. I always enjoy you speak, and I also share in your, thought. I think it's high time I'm heardable, so that yeah, please, can you confirm if you can still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Great. Yeah. So I so much share, your thoughts as regards the way forward. I think it's high time that we Africans, especially, find solution that are African in approach to our problem. We have a lot of, of disarray of purpose. So I think it's important that there's unity of purpose. That would spur us to, our destination, because with the way it's going, especially in my country, Nigeria, where we have, of course, the opposition, they are not even united. So it's difficult to, you want to rescue power from the mighty. So it's better we come together as one with unity of purpose to push the way forward as regards the liberation of Africa. So it is important that every stakeholder right now, come on board and ensure that we have the same purpose, unity of purpose, to bet that new Africa that we all dream for. Then I'm also a great advocate of, of including these peacekeeping activities, in our curriculum, because it's important that for the young people, especially from the cradle, you need something to catch their attention. So if we're having a lot of things being established in our curriculum, I think peacekeeping should also be inclusive, so that from that young age, they already have that consciousness, what they need to do to keep peace. It should not just be for the youth alone. It should start from, from the younger age, so that we'll not have people having a society that is bankrupt of ideas, that is bankrupt of the way forward of productivity, because young people today, they contribute large extent to, the rate of crime across the world. And it's important that we try to correct some of these evils in our society, so that we have a safer generation that will hand over to the next generation coming. Yeah, that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Israel. Any comments, Professor Lumumba?
Thank you very much. I can't agree more. I mean, this is, many times I hear people saying that we overanalyze our problems, and that the problems are known and the time for action is now. I can't agree more. That, as I've already indicated, there is need to have action. and action must be defined, and also to remind ourselves that even the Africa that we talk about is a very diverse continent. So that if you look at Nigeria, her own problems, there are certain nuances and certain unique aspects of it. If you look at Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, and you look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the hand of the former colonizers is becoming even stronger in many of these areas. You can see even when we talk about Gaza, you can see we know or we assume that if you wanted to solve the problems of Africa, you want strong institutions. And recently, you and me have witnessed what happened in the Sahel region and the manner in which the ECOWAS responded to it in a very poor way. Weak institution. The African Union is almost always silent. The European Union is talking about migration, JAPA, in the European Parliament, and nothing happens completely in Africa. There is a way and a sense in which we in the African continent must do things in a different way. And I want to emphasize, somebody said a little earlier, that the peace that we are talking about should also be known to youngsters. And I can't agree more. And I believe that one of the things that we ought to do going forward is to have a system of having peace clubs in schools, so that this idea of peace and understood in a very broad sense is inculcated in young minds at a very early age. And if we do that consistently in the realization that peace is not just for you and me now, but is an intergenerational thing, then we'll begin to move in a useful direction. And lastly, I always remind myself now as I grow older, let us not delude ourselves that we are the ones who are going to solve the problems of the world. No. What we are doing is to make our contribution. And if we make our contribution and people build upon it, then that will be the contribution that we have made. Let us also not assume that our contribution is too little. It takes droplets to make an ocean. And if we realize that, then we'll do what we must do in order to change society.
Thank you very much, Professor Lumumba. Individually and collectively, we can all make our contributions towards sustainable peace in the continent and across the world. We have two questions for you, Professor Lumumba. Before that, Solomon says synergy brings about cohesion. And with this great idea from Professor, Africa will definitely move forward for great heights. And of course, we have this question from Omondi, who says, I am so worried about my country, Kenya. Young people are quite engaging in promoting violence, more so university students and even to other parts of the continent in Africa. Professor Lumumba, explain strategies we can actually take to curb this action from happening day to day. And of course, just to connect to that, Kennedy says, why are continental and regional bodies failing to effectively address the challenges facing Africa? Additionally, why are Blacks in the diaspora seemingly uninterested in contributing to the efforts of salvaging Africa from the numerous problems we face as a continent? Over.
Very much, Omondi. First of all, let me start with the culture of violence, which we see not only in Kenya. In Kenya, what we see in terms of mobilization, people are mobilized around ethnicity. If you go to your typical Kenya university, you'll find Kikuyu Association, Luo Association, Kamba Association, and all these things, so that our sensibilities is not towards nation building. If you remember, the late Samora Machel of Mozambique said, in a multi-ethnic society, the tribe must die so that the new nation may live. And it did not mean that we killed the ethnicities. We can identify ourselves as Agikoyo, we can identify as Luo for cultural celebration, but it must not stand in the way of nation building. And as long as you mobilize in that way, and as long as we glorify violence, I want you to look at the leaders that we have in Kenya today, what they are famous for, many of them. They are famous, if you look at their history, because they were violent, and people emulate visible leadership. So we must have a different national ethos. It is out of ethos that you have ethics. Mwalimu Nyerere of Tanzania used to have a nation that does not have ideals and taboos, ideals to which you aspire and taboos that you do not engage in is a doomed nation. And that is true of very many African countries. If you ask, for example, somebody from Denmark, what do you stand for? They'll tell you. But if you ask, you are typical, you ask a Kenyan, what does Kenya really mean? Or what does Uganda mean? Or Sudan mean? It is when you appoint people, I've seen recently, those of you who are from Kenya, when somebody is appointed as a cabinet minister, he has a homecoming party at which he tells his tribesmen, now we are in government, as if government was a tribal enterprise. And if that is true of very many other African countries, it's true of Nigeria, it is true of Ghana, it is true of Southern Sudan. So we must do something. And we are, after independence, we are very young, and it can be done. If you look at the history of other nations, it is a history that has struggles. We, Kenya, must also have our struggle in that regard. The second thing is about continental bodies. Africa Union, as you know it, is funded 70% by the European Union. Its headquarters is built by the Chinese. It is funded by the Germans. It is funded by the United States of America. And if I remember the old English saying, he or she who pays the piper calls the tunes. African institutions are weak because they are underfunded, and African governments are not interested in their success. Look at the African Union. Look at the Pan-African Court, which meets in Midrand. Look at the African Court, which meets in Arusha and Tanzania. Look at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is headquartered in Accra, Ghana. And even if you go to the regional bodies, you come to East African Community, you come to ECOWAS, you come to SADC, we don't fund our institution. Look at the African Center for Disease Control, which is based in Addis Ababa with 5 other centers in Nairobi, in Gabon, in Lusaka. They are funded by the CDC in the United States of America. So the first thing is funding. And if you look at research and development, Africans said we were going to reserve 1% of our budgets for research and development. Nothing. If you look at the patents that have been registered in Africa in the last 1 year, the state of Israel registers more patents for creativity and innovation than the entire continent of Africa. In a nutshell, if you look at peacekeeping, for example, in Sudan, it is the Americans, even in the Sudanese war, who is trying to broker peace. It is the Saudis and it's the Americans, and where do they meet? In Jeddah. So I am of the view that we must pay for what we are involved in so that we have a skin in the game. Lastly, diaspora. I work with the diaspora in different parts of Africa. My good sister, Arikana Chihombori Kwao from Zimbabwe, I remember in 2018, Arikana and I took 200, and it was largely a handiwork, and she invited me, took 200 African Americans and people drawn from the Caribbean to Ghana. And as I talk to you, there are people who are investing in Ghana in that regard. I myself took 53 people from 13 African countries in the diaspora in 2 years ago to meet President Chakwera of Malawi and their investment that are going on there. 2 months ago, Arikana and others went and met President Traore in Burkina Faso, and these were people drawn from the diaspora. So the diaspora is trying to be useful, but sometimes the governments in the continent are not helpful. You come into an environment, you want to invest, and there is no shortage of people asking for bribes. So we in the continent must also be in a position to create an enabling environment for our kin and kith in different parts of the world to come. And lastly, I want to say that we must never for one moment imagine that when we are talking about African solution to African problems, we are not telling Americans or Europeans or Asians not to help, but we must support each other from a position of strength. In that way, we can give meaning to what we call the global village. But as it is now, Africa is so weak, and the way she relates to the world is the relationship between the horse and the rider. And Africa is the horse, and the riders are occasionally from China, from America, from Turkey, and Africa invariably gets the short hand of the stick. And I hope and believe, and I want to be relevant to this conversation, that when we talk about peace, peace is only possible in an environment where there is mutual respect. And sustainable peace can only be realized in that environment. And the good doctor who has started this initiative, I want to encourage you to remember that the strength of this initiative demands that all of us are able to look and to emphasize our strengths and to de-emphasize our weaknesses. All of us who are present here, you are strong in one thing, I'm weak in one thing. But if we combine our efforts, then we'll be that much stronger. And I hold the view that that is what we should do going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Professor Lumumba. Please, can we give him a round of applause in the chat room? This is so wonderful. Absolutely, we need to work in synergy because one hand of always can never tie a bundle. So there is that need for us to collectively work to make sure that our actions are actually making some sense in terms of blending our weaknesses and strengths for sustainable peace. We have some other comments that have just come in. And one is from Dr. Mugisho, who says, interesting points with Professor. Our countries will never develop if we do not have visionary leaders who motivate the youth. We need strong institutions with clear visions, with people who are committed to implementing, of course, fairly those visions. Such developments will succeed if the youth and women are strongly involved, as they are the key pillar for any community. And of course, Israel adds that it is not the duty of the oppressors to free the oppressed, but it is the duty of the latter to break his chains. Nigerians must recognize that freedom and progress will not be handed to them, they must be taken. Africa's liberation lies in the hands of Africans. And of course, we have this from Gavin, who says, absolutely, tribalism is really so bad for the development of a nation. Tribes must really die in order for the nation to properly stand, especially in DR Congo, where 80% of key positions in the Congolese government are held by people from the same tribe as the president of the country, which is leading today to the rise of much hatred among the Congolese population. Okumu, appreciation of ethnic diversity in Africa will greatly contribute to find a common ground for development. Any comments, Professor Lumumba? Very rich contributions there. Thank you.
Only thing that I think is critical going forward, because these beautiful ideas are really there, and I'm quite certain those of us who are sitting wherever we are saying, but how can we give practical meaning to these ideas? What is it that we can do? And one of the things that I personally do every so often, and it doesn't matter to me whether they reply, when I have ideas that I think are critical, I write to all. There is no African head of state that I don't write to every 6 months. Whether they reply or not is another debate. But I say, for example, right now I'm writing to all African heads of states. You know that there is a man who is going around the world called Tony Blair, who used to be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And he's advising African presidents out of a document that he generated when he was the chairman of the G8 and the European Union in 2005. The document is called Our Common Interest Report for an African Commission. And I'm saying this is a document that was meant for Africa. Shouldn't the African Union be the one that is dealing with it for implementation? Yet we are paying Tony Blair millions in naira, in shillings, in kwacha, in order to advise us. So I am of the view that what we must do once again, and I'm repeating this almost ad nauseum, is that in the coming year, what is it that we are going to do in our little spheres of influence? And because we are regional, a body such as this, and I am a member of a number of bodies which, as you seek observer status at ECOWAS, you seek observer status at all these regional bodies, and we dramatize what it is that we want to do. And in our own small way, there is a gentleman from Nigeria who spoke at the very outset about having visited a school yesterday and how the young people were coming to him. This shows you that there is appetite for the right thing. How do we upscale it? And let us not for one moment, as I said a little earlier, imagine that what will my little contribution make? And really, your little contribution is what will begin to change, is the nut in a wheel, which cannot be ignored, because without the nut, the wheel is useless. So I can't re-emphasize and emphasize again that conversations such as this are critical. Why are they critical? For two reasons. They remind us when you are sitting alone in your room, wherever you are, sometimes you imagine, what can I do? You get into depression. But when you are in an environment such as this, you then know that the problem is not only yours. There are others who are thinking like you. And secondly, because we cross-fertilize each other's ideas. And when we do so, we are then in a position to improve our own ideas and to articulate them and make them much more useful for our different societies. Rich conversation. Let us continue and also look to implementation.
Thank you very much. Of course, we want to encourage this kind of conversations because together we can be able to harness our efforts towards solving some of, or actually providing possible solutions to some of the situations or crisis situations that we find in our different countries across the world. Just one last question before we go. We have just 6 minutes to go. We have some comments, and I'll read the comments and then I end up with the question. Professor, if you don't mind. Africans undergo various issues and they should be able to find solutions to them. Africans must lead in finding solutions to their issues, must lead with initiatives and funding, but again, still seek collaboration with other leaders here and there. Collaboration is not bad in addressing local issues, but depending on the outside for helping a drowning person who cannot raise their hand for an SOS will not really help. Do something on your own. Then seek for assistance in case you are struggling. We Africans are our own solutions to our problems. A foreigner will worsen our issues if we keep our hands folded. That is from Dr. Mugisho. Thank you. And of course, from Muhiwe, should we say an African approach to solving conflicts and with its associated problem is necessary in Africa? For too long, external models have been imposed on African societies, always disregarding indigenous knowledge. They have disrupted the African culture setting. And of course, they have disrupted the African cultural setting. African leaders today seem to be so detached from the African cultural values. How are you going to lead your people when in actual sense, you are so different from them? Is there need to at least fuse these African models and our cultural values to find solutions? And of course, Rudolph says, in addition to all that have been said, I think visionlessness and visions differed by colonialists. are acute problems to address for the development of Africa. And Kizzy Moses asked this question: what is your say on the so copy and paste, which is inherent, where policies are not contextualized, but rather implemented in settings in Africa where they aren't needed? Okay, Professor Lumumba.
If in answer, I'll give one example. One, in East Africa, under the East African Community, one of the decisions that was made a while ago, that in order to revive our textile industries, we would stop importation of second-hand clothing. And this was an agreement that involved Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. Rwanda and Uganda, to their credit, actually imposed the ban. But Kenya then entered into an arrangement with the United States under AGOA to continue importation of second-hand clothing. As I speak to you, if you are a Ugandan trader or a Rwandese trader and you want to continue to trade in second-hand clothing, you import through Kenya and then use the porous borders. And in that way, we have killed our textile industries, which were beginning to revive. So one of the things that is evident in most of Africa is that it is still very easy to divide and rule Africa, divide and conquer African countries. And this is one of the things that one hoped that if we were working under the regional economic blocks, such as East African Community, such as SADC, such as ECOWAS, such as in the Maghreb, in the North and in Central Africa, we would immunize ourselves again. But once again, because we have leaders who have a short-term view of things, always thinking of the next election rather than the next generation, we find ourselves in this unfortunate situation. On the question of copying and pasting, I always remind Africa that let us borrow from what others have done. You don't need, as the cliche goes, to reinvent the wheel. Those of you who are older will remember that 30 years ago, the thing that we call Dubai was a desert. Today, there is no middle-class African or African politician who does not want to own an apartment in Dubai. What did they do? They identified what was right and they used it. They are the resource. Dubai itself does not even have oil. It's Abu Dhabi that has oil. And if you look at the Emiratis, look at Qatar, look at Brunei, Darussalam, look at Bahrain. What did they do? We can do it. Look at Vietnam. Those of you who come from Nigeria may know that by next year, Malaysia will be producing more palm oil than Nigeria, and they got the palm from Nigeria. As we speak now, Vietnam, by the year 2026, will be producing more coffee than Kenya and Uganda combined. In mobile telephony and this technology that we are engaged in, what did the Koreans do? What did the Chinese do that in the last 30 years they have lifted 880 million plus out of poverty? So Africa finds itself in a situation where it can leapfrog many countries in terms of development. And I use the word Africa very guardedly, knowing as I do that I'm talking about 54 countries which have different orientations, but which have also realized that if they continue to operate in silos, they will go nowhere. Hence the 63, hence Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and I can't agree with you more. You should not cut if you do not know how to paste. Africa cuts, but it does not know how to paste. If you cut, you must know how to paste. If you adopt, you must know how to adapt. And let me tell you, there is no shortage of good Africans, knowledgeable Africans. In Nigeria, for example, Dr. Nikki, if you were to ask for a professional in agriculture to do away with genetically modified organisms which are killing our seeds, you'll find a Nigerian in every sector. But your typical Nigerian politician would prefer to deal with somebody from outside of Nigeria and pay the Nigerian pittance and peanuts. So it is our mental slavery which needs liberation, which will help us to do things that will help the continent of Africa. And we have seen it, as I conclude, countries such as Brazil, and even a country such as Indonesia. Indonesia now has a GDP of nearly 1.5 trillion. Brazil nearly 2 trillion. And I am saying that it can be done in the continent of Africa. And it's through such initiatives that we can begin to make the agenda move forward. I know time does not allow us to go into the depths of this, but in our own ways, we can enrich this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Professor Lumumba. We are so blessed to have had you. If in maybe 1 minute you can give your closing statements, we will be grateful.
By repeating a saying that I had only 2 days ago. A friend of mine from Ghana was in a meeting with me, and he said that there is a Tui Akan saying which says that if you run after a coward for too long, you will meet his courage. I think and the moral of that training is that you must know people have been running around, after Africa for too long thinking that we are cowards, but I think they're about to meet our courage. And that will only happen when we also realize our potential and begin to define who we are. I want us to read a speech that was delivered by Thabo Mbeki in 1996. It is called, "I Am an African." You must define yourself first. The Japanese defined themselves, the Chinese defined themselves, the Arabs defined themselves, the Europeans defined themselves. It is in defining and understanding yourself that you can then meet the world. But if you do not know where your destination is, everywhere is the destination, and you reach nowhere therefore. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you so very much. Please, can we give our professor, our legendary professor, unmute your microphones and give him a round of applause, please. Can you unmute your microphones and your cameras, please?
Thank you so much,
Give
Professor.
him a round of applause as we actually appreciate him. And
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much.
And God bless you.
If we can just mute our microphones again.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you
so much for meeting
All right.
Thank you.
On
God bless you.
behalf of Global Peace Let's Talk, I want to extend our deepest gratitude to Professor Lumumba for his thought-provoking keynote address and insightful conversation. Professor Lumumba, your unwavering dedication to ethical leadership, justice and governance, as well as your passion for the principles of nonviolent communication and servant leadership have profoundly inspired and enlightened us all today. Your powerful words and insights remind us of the critical role each of us must play in fostering peace and promoting integrity within our communities and across the world. We are honored by your presence, Professor, and grateful for the wealth of knowledge you have imparted. As Global Peace Let's Talk, we look forward to continuing this meaningful dialogue and work in synergy with you to champion sustainable peace, good governance, and ethical leadership throughout Africa and beyond. We also hope to collaborate further to translate the principles discussed today into actionable steps that create lasting impact. To all our participants, thank you for your active engagement and contributions during this session. Your input and involvement demonstrate the collective will for change and progress. We believe that together, like Professor Lumumba said, we can create a powerful movement for positive transformation. Once again, thank you, Prof. On behalf of the Chief Executive Officer of Global Peace Let's Talk, Dr. Nikki, and the entire executive team and membership, and to everyone present for making today's conversation a success. We look forward for future dialogues as we continue to build a peaceful
Thank you
and
very much.
prosperous future for all. Thank you, and have a wonderful day to you, Professor Lumumba, and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Good day.
Thanks a lot. Asante
Thank you.
sana.
Thank
Canada.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Dr. Nikki. Bye-bye, Dr. Nikki. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nikki. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Dr. Nikki. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.